So I had the privilege a few years ago to work with some Wyoming educators to come up with their state standards. But one of the things that we talked about is how the process typically was like a decade or so between like when standards were implemented and when a new revision came out. But that is too slow of a process for computer science education. So when we are engaging in these standards, we have this like tendency to create things that are relevant in the time, but we don't necessarily adapt to the changes that happen over the subsequent years, and therefore the standards become more and more out of date and less useful. So what can we do about this? So the author mentions in this keynote that the first thing that they recommend is that instead of calling them standards, perhaps we should call them guidelines. So here's a quote from the bottom of page 5. Quote, "Standards are codes for compliance, meant to keep things in place and predictable for a paradigm that looks like this," vertical line, "and is about the past. That is not what we are about," end quote. Now, if you're wondering what does the vertical line thing refer to, it's talking about something that's mentioned in the pages above it. So if you're interested to check that out, but it's just kind of like a framework or metaphor to think through. But the main point of this particular argument is if we change the word standards to guidelines, then it makes it more honest as to what they are and then less punitive. So every state has like different variations of like the national standards, which makes it so that there's more local control. So some districts have a different set of standards than other districts, depending on what state you're in, whereas some states have just like alignment to the national standards. Now, again, this is just guidelines. Like, I agree that the wording is better, and hopefully we can look at this and like understand that it should be more adaptable to the local, which we talk about a little bit later in this particular keynote. And if you want to hear the rest of this particular podcast episode, make sure you check out the CSK8 podcast by searching for it on any major platform or simply going to jaredoleary.com/CSK8. At the moment, there are over 160 episodes with some interviews with some awesome people and some solo episodes like this where I unpack scholarship in relation to computer science education.